In the beginning of September 2015, I was in Denmark when people started arriving with the boat from Germany in the hundreds, eventually in the thousands. And the very immediate reaction of a lot of people was to get into their cars from different parts of the country and drive down to the ferry terminal, which is on an island. It's a small town with 500 people, and pick them up and drive them to Sweden, basically, or to a place where they could take the train to Sweden. And the people who did this were, of course, the usual humanitarians, let's say, left-wing anti-racist activists, but also completely ordinary people, including the ordinary people that usually we forget are very ordinary people in our societies, are people with a long-term migration background in Denmark. And what was unusual about this was that these groups that would normally never work together were suddenly coordinating their efforts and their cars to find the migrants, because they started walking on the highway, they started walking on the country roads, and it would have been a 3-day walk to Copenhagen from there. So they had to find them in the middle of the night, for instance, where they were hiding from the police. And when I was kind of, I threw myself into this and just kind of helped put people in contact to facilitate this exchange of information. And what I realized brought these people together, it was very clear, was that everyone knew this was not just a humanitarian emergency in the sense that you have families walking in the Danish summer night, which can be quite chilly with children on the highway. But it was also an issue of the society that we live in. It was an anti-racist effort, very clearly. It was Danes who knew that if these people who arrive here are being dehumanized, it will continue to make the racism that is already in Danish society more profound, but also, of course, people with migrant background knew this very well. That the way that the new arrivals would be treated would reflect on them. So this concerns all of us. Do we want to live in split societies, or do we want to live in societies of solidarity? Anyways.
We organized an event here yesterday that was called Solidarity Cities, Rethinking the Right to the City Through Migrations. And maybe we can also, I would like to narrate some of the key questions that we addressed yesterday, mostly with actors from different countries. We had somebody from Solidarity for All in Greece here, who talked to us about some of the autonomous infrastructures of support that work across locals, migrants and refugees. We had somebody from the new Vienna for All campaign present the work of grassroots movements in Vienna around producing mutual aid for migrants, refugees, and also locals to some extent. We heard about We Are All Zurich, which is also a relatively new campaign around the right to the city in Zurich. And we heard briefly from somebody from the neighborhood section of Ciudad Refuge, which I believe this morning you had Ignacio Calvo and somebody else from Barcelona City Council here talking about Ciudad Refuge, right? So I don't know if they mentioned this, but there is a very strong neighborhood element to this campaign. So we had somebody from the neighborhoods talk about their outlook, also their outlook now after the recent elections in Spain, and how this Ciudad Refuge kind of campaign might go into a next phase. And we heard also briefly from a kind of very young activist platform in Padova that's called Padova Accolia, Padova Welcomes. And from a kind of time bank, a neighborhood-based time bank in Vienna that's called Tauschkreis, who are also putting together locals and newly arrived people in one specific neighborhood in Vienna on a kind of bartering basis. And so the starting point from our event yesterday was that there seems to be a lot of things happening around cities, not only at the institutional level, like with the Barcelona City Council and some other cities that have also stepped up and said, well, if the states are not responding to the so-called migrant or refugee crisis, we will. But also at the social movement level, there's been a lot of creativity and efforts to create infrastructure in the cities to welcome people and to do things together. So beyond just the mere impulse of helping or kind of spontaneously assisting supposed victims, what we spoke about yesterday a lot is especially how different initiatives manage to bridge the gap between locals, migrants, refugees, supposedly clear divisions between these three groups, and set up initiatives where people work together to create other forms of institutions essentially within the city, and so produce a political horizon within the city that corresponds to the kind of societies that we actually would want to live within, where we don't need these kind of assistentialist practices and where we don't necessarily only rely on the state or bigger municipal institutions to provide infrastructures for us. A reference for this was, of course, also at the institutional level, the sanctuary cities in the US, which is, I don't know if anybody mentioned them, but there are over 50 cities in the US who since the mid-1980s have produced various small, campaigns or small tools to open their cities to refugees particularly. One of the most interesting tools of theirs, I think, is the introduction of municipal ID cards. This is something that I know people are also speaking about to some extent in Barcelona. So ID cards which are issued to anybody who's registered in the city regardless of whether they have papers. On the one hand, to protect undocumented people from being stopped and arrested or stopped and searched. So this ID card is a kind of quasi-legal, or within the space of the city, it actually functions as a valid form of ID. The state doesn't recognize it, but it also gets you access to discounts in transport, in access to, public institutions, etc., swimming pools and so on.
It's important to say it's an ID card for all the citizens of the city, but including people without papers. So it's an ID card that doesn't allow anyone to distinguish between those who have the formal right and those who don't be there.
Yeah. So this is one of the tools that we find quite inspiring, and Rübner and I have been involved in researching also together with some other people for the City Council in Barcelona, possible mechanisms that could be adopted within such a broad frame as a refuge city or a city of welcome. But we also think that the role of social movements is very, very crucial. I mean, in Barcelona, this is clear now, especially since the elections have passed, and it's become clear that the central government will probably not do a lot to live up to its 18,000 more or less people that it should have welcomed from Hungary, Italy, or Greece through this European widely dismissed and ignored relocation scheme. And so there's a question of what social movements within the city also can do to produce forms of welcoming for people who inevitably are already here, regardless of whether they come and register as refugees, whether they have this official status. So this is something we discussed a lot yesterday, thinking about social movements and institutions and how together they can invent a new horizon for political action in Europe, also in the face of this kind of deadlock of the states and the neoliberal post-welfare impasse, and how possibly networks of cities in Europe, this is the frame within which we're thinking, but it doesn't have to be limited to Europe, can somehow be possibly a new way for us to imagine kind of international or inter-city political empowerment.
Yes, we're talking about welcoming, but actually the concept that's much more important for us is solidarity. Welcoming is something you do to an outsider who is considered, let's say, not a part of your community, and it's a charitable gesture, easily, you know. Solidarity is something you do with someone that you share an interest with. For instance, like I was mentioning, an interest in having an open and non-racist society allows people to organize together, whether they are asylum seekers, migrants, long-term migrants, people with citizenship, part of the majority of the population or whatever. There will be a possibility of an alliance between people of those different groups to say we want a society that's open. That's solidarity. So it's important, for instance, and one thing that's been hyped a lot is the welcoming culture of Germany. But it has to be seen in the context of German Employees Association asking Merkel to accept 1 million refugees in order to replenish the aging German workforce. That was already before the summer of migration in the spring last year. And this is, of course, something that makes a lot of German wage earners nervous, especially those in the lower end who will be competing for jobs with the newly arrived, especially in the context of let's say, precarious working conditions that have been implemented for the past 15 years since the Hartz programs and so on. So, in that context, the welcoming culture a welcoming culture that doesn't include solidarity, that doesn't include a common idea of a, let's say, a struggle for common rights, for the conditions both of Germans who are under pressure and refugees and new migrants is something that opens for the anti-migration discourse. It's something that opens for the nervousness of people to be articulated into an anti-refugee sentiment. This is very clear with the success of Alternative for Deutschland, for instance, in the last elections, which horrified everyone. It's not because people are idiots or because they're uneducated, it's because in Germany right now, the strongest form of solidarity available to a lot of people seems to be an exclusive nationalist solidarity. So the question for us is to produce a different kind of open, non-nationalist solidarity. And this happened in Greece. Just to say, I mean, there is an incredible potential out of the governments are failing to deal with the issue. In Germany, there was 11 million people participating in helping refugees in different ways. According to the evangelical church, they made a big investigation about this. And that is a potential. And it's a huge potential. It's 10% of the German population actively participating in welcoming people. But the political direction that is given decides a lot. No? So in Greece, a similar number was 5.5 to 6 million people. But in Greece, it was articulated very clearly not as welcoming, but as solidarity. And what you've seen there is a stalling of the growth of the far right, for instance. In relation to migration and refugees, there's often an idea of national citizenship as something that excludes a number of people from entering into a given state. If we look at it from the point of view of the city, it's something that divides people. Yeah? National citizenship is something that divides cities because there are people always in modern cities who don't have it, or who have a lesser form of it, who are in the process of becoming citizens. So, from the point of view of our cities, if we don't see ourselves as nationals, but as people who inhabit cities and are interested in the conviviality of modern cities, so convivencia, as we're talking about here in Barcelona, we have to talk about how to overcome the divisions that national citizenship status create within our communities, within our cities, within our neighborhoods. The way these divisions facilitate, for instance, the exploitation of some people who become part of the black labor market because they don't have job permits, or part of a criminal economy, for instance, and how it facilitates competition between people who have work permits and people who are nationals, because those that only have the work permits are more exploitable because they're more precarious, they don't know their rights so well, etc., etc., etc. And how that facilitates, let's say, the formation of anti-migrant discourse, xenophobia and so on, and how the divisions produced by national citizenship are part of this other continuously. So, it looks like we're coming towards the end of our presentation. Thanks for your patience.